Hello there everybody and welcome to the Mr. Sin YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about the revolutions of 1830 and 1848. Now this video is the second video in a three-part series. So make sure you've checked out the first video, which is on the isms. These are different ideologies that really created the revolutions themselves. Today we're going to be talking about just what happened in these revolutions. And we're going to be talking about a bunch of different things that happened throughout all of Europe. So make sure you're following along with the guided notes and sit back and enjoy. Let's get started. Now, in order for us to fully understand why these revolutions happened throughout Europe, we don't only have to understand the isms, but we also have to go back to France. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Mr. Sin, we just learned about this. Why do we need to talk about France again? Well, I'm only going to go into the French Revolution just a little bit as a recap. If you need more information or if you need a better review, make sure to watch those videos. But it's important for us to go back to France because in 1830, this is where we started to see kind of the first big revolution. France goes through yet another French Revolution. So a quick recap of some of the things that we talked about before. France Revolution begins in 1789. The French are like, we're done with this king. The Third Estate rises up. They start to become more radicalized, more power to the people, not just liberalism, but radicalization. And Louis XVI is going to get killed along with Queen Marie Antoinette. Then we'll have that reign of terror that's going to happen around 1793 to 1794. Eventually that'll end and France will get its own constitution in 1795. Now, between the French Revolution and also the next one in 1830 that we're going to be getting into right now, we have Napoleon come. And Napoleon takes power in 1799. And ultimately, he gets defeated in 1815. Now, Napoleon almost took over essentially all of Europe, and Russia was really the only thing that stopped him. And he tried to get back into power again and failed. But Napoleon was kind of defeated. Now, what we start to see is this Congress of Vienna meets, and they meet from around 1814 to 1815. And the reason why it's significant is they're meeting to make sure these monarchs stay in power. They're like, hey guys, we have a serious situation here. Everyone thinks they can kill kings. That's not okay. We gotta stop that. So the Congress of Vienna meets to try and reestablish conservative values, not, again, remember, current day conservatism and liberalism, but make it so people go back to respecting the monarchy and things stay the way they are. Now, one of the things the Congress of Vienna decides to do is they actually put Louis XVIII to the throne in France. He was the brother of Louis XVI, the king that got killed, but they gave him limited power. So there's a difference here. They were trying to meet in the middle a little bit. They wanted to keep the monarchy, they wanted to keep the old lifestyle, but they also realized that they couldn't just go back to like absolutism. So Louis XVIII actually has a constitution that he has to follow and he sticks there and he has some limited power. And for the most part, he does all right. Now, eventually, though, he dies, and Charles X is going to become king. And Charles X is going to reject it all. He's going to say, I'm not following this constitution. He's going to start rolling back some of these freedoms that the French people had started to become accustomed to and wanted to. He was anti-Enlightenment. He didn't need freedom of speech. He didn't think the people needed that. He was going against it. He starts to roll these things back, and the people start to get upset. And this is where we have these revolutions happen again in France. So around 1830 now, we're starting to see the people get upset. They're protesting. Both the liberals and the radicals are like, no, this is not happening again. We have a constitution. You need to follow it. Charles, you're not going to follow it? Well, we're not going to accept you then. And ultimately, Charles X is going to have to abdicate his power, meaning he's going to have to essentially kind of flee. He gives up his power, and they're going to put another king in place. So the next king that they're going to be getting is King Louis Philippe. And the radicals didn't necessarily want a king again. They wanted more of a republic. But the liberals, we have division here between the ideas, they wanted to go back to a king. So King Louis Philippe came in and he had a constitutional monarch. Didn't have absolute power. It was limited. He had to focus on what essentially the people wanted. Now, even though Philippe is going to try, he's going to do his best, he's going to try to support the people, and he actually does fairly well. I mean, most of the people are better off. The lower class and some of the middle class still are struggling, but he was trying. even though he did try, it didn't ultimately work. And in 1848, we're going to see another revolution that is going to get rid of King Philippe. And we're going to see then the monarch kind of get overthrown and a republic be put in place. So after the revolution of 1848, we now see the French move away from a monarchy. The radicals take over. They start to form a republic. And we see a new constitution drafted that is going to give universal male suffrage. All men will be able to vote. So we are not necessarily at full democracy yet, but now everyone who's a man can vote. And after the new constitution was ratified on November 4th, 1848, we see France now become the Second Republic. So France actually did pretty well in these revolutions. They succeeded. They're one of the few that did. It took them a little bit, but they got there in the end. Now, also going on in 1830, we have other revolutions that start to spread throughout Europe. And they were really hoping to also be successful. In that same year, these ideas of nationalism started to take a hold, and people were tired of the government not representing the people that actually live there. So Belgium had been annexed to the former Dutch Republic in 1815. And in 1830, they rebelled. They wanted their own state, and they actually succeeded. I mean, they're still around today. Belgium still exists. In case you didn't know, now you know. Poland, Germany, and Italy also tried in 1830 to get freedom and independence from the foreign powers that controlled them. However, they ended up failing horribly. They got crushed. Russian troops came into Poland to destroy any hopes there, along with Germany, or the German states at that time. Austria's troops defeated the Italian states and kept them under control. So out of 1830's revolutions, the only ones that were successful really were France. I mean, they were kind of successful during the 1830 revolution. It's going to take them all the way to 48 to get true what they wanted. I mean, their independence essentially. And then for 1830, really the big winner there was Belgium. They actually succeeded in what they were trying to do. Now, we talked in class about this idea that if one group does something and they show that it can be done, other groups will try to follow. The saying in Europe during this time became, in France sneezes, the rest of Europe gets a cold. When the French Revolution succeeded, it showed other people that, hey, you can do it. News started to spread. People started to say, hey, did you see what the French did? The French got rid of their king. Not only did they get rid of their king once, twice, eventually 3 times, they fought for the people. We should do that too. We should have our own freedoms. Why do we let the European kings tell us what to do when they don't help us? And so we start to see change happen. One of the things the Congress of Vienna did, remember, that was trying to make sure that the king stayed in power and we started to limit the role of the people, is they split up some of the states. I mean, states, you know, in the United States we have 50 of them, but there are also countries that exist around the world. And they recognized 38 independent German states. These states are kind of known as the German Confederation. And Austria and Prussia were the 2 great powers during this time. In 1848, people started to demand change. Many of these German rulers that were controlling these states had promised constitutions, free press, they wanted jury trials, and they were talking about other liberal reforms. But they weren't necessarily giving that to the people, and people were starting to get upset. So we have this Frankfurt Assembly, which was called to really help create a new constitution to help unify some of these German states. The goal was to get elections and voting and a bunch of other rights for the people and support some of these liberal ideas. Ultimately, though, what's going to happen here is this Frankfurt Assembly is going to fail. There isn't going to be a German unification. Revolutions will start to happen, but they weren't able to come together. And so for the most of these areas, nothing much changed. I mean, there was a lot of hope and optimism, and they tried to go off some of the success of the French and other revolutions, but they didn't achieve much. Now, Central Europe was, it was heavily under the control of the Austrian Empire. And in 1848, the Austrian Empire was a multinational empire. All this means is that there was a bunch of different nationalities living there. There wasn't just one common group. Remember, we have the rise of nationalism, so these groups started to identify more with each other. This loyalty to one group or people starts to take hold. I mean, in Central Europe, you have the Germans, the Czechs, the Poles, we have the Serbs, we have the Ukrainians, Italians, all these different people. And they started to want their own rights. Revolution ideas started to spread. People saw what was happening in France and other areas, and they wanted that too. And in March 1848, demonstrations essentially just erupted throughout all of Central Europe. People were wanting new constitutions and liberal ideas. These Enlightenment ideas they wanted for themselves. They thought that they should have it, and they were tired of getting turned down. Ultimately, what happens is the Austrian military, with the help of the Russian military, crushes everyone. None of these succeed. They all get shut down. Even though they tried and they had the numbers, they just couldn't compete with the conservatives' ideas. I mean, they had the military, the powers, the resources, and they were able to crush them. So all these revolutions throughout there failed. They didn't get what they wanted to. And in the end, it kind of just went back to normal. Now, the seeds have been planted, these ideas are still there, and we'll see change eventually, but it's going to take some time. Now, the last area in Europe that we're going to talk about is Italy. Now, the Congress of Vienna had split Italy into 9 states, and it was owned by a couple different European powers. Spain had part of it, Austria had part of it, the Vatican did, and in 1848, people wanted their own Italy. They wanted a unified Italy. They were tired of having this division and other foreign powers control it. So radical and liberals started to take hold, and we started to see a revolution occur. Unfortunately for the Italians, though, they end up failing, just like most of Europe. They get shot down. The old regime provides more powerful, and they aren't able to have a unified Italy. Now, these are just a couple examples of some of the revolutions that have spread throughout Europe. And hopefully you can kind of see there was a lot going on during this time frame. But the big question is, why did they all fail? I mean, all of these revolutions are happening. It worked for Belgium and France, but nowhere else. No one was able to succeed. So make sure you check out the next video to figure out the answer there, as we'll explore exactly what happened and what went wrong. Thank you again for watching. Hopefully this helped you better understand what was going on during the revolutions of 1830 and 1848. Don't forget to subscribe and support the channel, and check out the next part of this video. Have a great day, night, day, whenever you're watching this. I'm Mr. Sin, and I'll see you online.